Welcome to the Conversation Lab. I'm Don Schaefer. If democracy begins in conversation, then we need to nurture a culture where ordinary people like us routinely talk about those things that help us understand each other, whether it's about climate, race, religion, gender, or politics. When we're trying to make sense of our city and the world we live in, every question comes with a set of assumptions about the nature of ourselves and our place in a larger world. The Conversation Lab provides a safe place to talk about some of those things. This program is produced by CFRO-FM in Vancouver. It's available on air and online on various platforms, and we appreciate the help of Vancouver's community groups. Today in the Conversation Lab, we're speaking with Chris Mcbride, who's the Executive Director of Spinal Cord Injury BC. We're also speaking with Teri Thorson, who is a motivational speaker, fashion designer, and Paralympic athlete. Can you talk about SCI? What is it, and what kind of work do you do, and how did you both come to it?
Well, Don, the long history is that our organization was founded by World War II veterans returning from the war with spinal cord injuries in 1945, and wanted to set up something that better supported their needs, both from a health perspective and from a psychosocial perspective. And so the Canadian Paraplegic Association was born back in 1945. Spinal Cord Injury BC became a separate organization in 1957. And our work has always been founded on the core values of peer support. And it's changed over time. But today, our organization focuses primarily on peer support, on providing information services, and on a program that we call Access BC, which is helping to improve access and inclusion for British Columbians, with a particularly emphasis on accessible tourism and accessible outdoor recreation spaces. One thing that makes our organization unique is the fact that over half of our staff are people with spinal cord injuries or other disabilities themselves. And those that are delivering the service are all people with a spinal cord injury and one person with a low vision. And so it allows our organization to really understand the challenges that our members and those that are engaged in our services are facing, and their ability to help is immeasurably supported because of that.
Yeah, I would think when somebody reaches out for information or help, there's a much different connection because of that.
Absolutely. Our people are the service.
So how did you come to the organization? I know that you finished your PhD in neuroscience in 2000?
I embarked on my PhD in 1992, looking at spinal cord injury regeneration work at UBC, and loved the research, but didn't love it enough to continue to do an academic track, and was really fortunate around the time that I finished my PhD that Dr. John Steeves, my supervisor, was starting a group called CORD. At the time it had become ICORD, the International Collaboration on Repair Discoveries, and he invited me onto his administrative team, and I eventually became the managing director of the ICORD Research Center. We built a new research building at the Vancouver General Hospital site, the Blessing Spinal Cord Center. And I guess through my work with ICORD, I did a lot of work with community partners, and I really loved that part of it. I eventually became managing director of the Rick Hansen Institute, which is now the Praxis Spinal Cord Institute. And again, one of my favorite parts was working with community partners here in BC and across the country. And it was just by chance that at one time I ran into the executive director of Spinal Cord Injury BC in a grocery store, and she said, "Chris, I'm retiring, and I'd love you to take my job." And it just seemed like the perfect time for me to take on the challenge of running a community service organization, and I didn't regret it at all. So that was 10 and a half years ago, and I still love my job.
Teri, how about you?
Well, I think Chris answered the question about what is Spinal Cord Injury BC really well. So specifically, a spinal cord injury is when you have damage to your spinal cord. So you can do damage to your spine, the bone part of your spine, and not have a spinal cord injury. But when you have a spinal cord injury, that's when usually it's It can happen from a traumatic or a non-traumatic cause, so something like a tumor or something that might grow or on the spinal cord itself, or such as myself, who had a spinal cord injury 24 years ago now, where I had a motor vehicle crash and I damaged the bones in my neck, which then also damaged and creates this bruising around the spinal cord. And interestingly enough, Chris will correct me because he's the science guy, but the spinal cord is the only really part of the body that does not regenerate itself and heal itself. It can happen to anybody, obviously, and there are very varying degrees of spinal cord injury, right? So you can injure one bone a certain way, and it can damage the spinal cord a different way. I like to kind of call it like it's the electrical wire between your brain and your body. So it's taking signals of movement and feeling and everything that you do that are just automatic to us in our world, and that connection is sort of lost. So as far as myself, as I mentioned, I had my car crash 24 years ago while I was traveling in Australia, and received sustained a spinal cord injury at the C6 level. So that is basically like the lowest, almost the lowest bone in your neck. And if you can like reach around and feel at the back of your neck, that's like kind of the bone that just above the bone that sticks out a little bit. So that would be C6, and each vertebrae is a different number. So it starts with cervical, then thoracic, and lumbar, and sacral. So, and then each one bone has a number. So I am C6. I have no feeling or movement, so chest level down. And it also means that I have no hand function as well, because the nerves associated with that spinal cord injury will be affected depending where you get hurt. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight. Any questions about that? Chris, any additions?
Well, I would just say that the other part about spinal cord injuries, Teri's described often what is the traumatic spinal cord injury that's happened from an accident or something like that. But about 50% of the spinal cord injuries these days also happen from non-traumatic reasons. So from infections, from cancer, from developmental issues. And so it's a wide range. And, as one of SCI BC's research partners says, if you've met one person with spinal cord injury, you've met one person with spinal cord injury, because they're all so different in the way that it expresses itself and the challenges that it creates.
Well, let's talk about the challenges. Mm-hmm. So what are they?
Teri, you want to take a start at that?
Oh, my goodness. Where do they start? Well, I mean, I think there's a whole progression of challenges and barriers that we face depending on where you're at in your spinal cord injury. So, I mean, I can only speak from my own experience specifically, but in the beginning, I was very focused on getting back to what my life was like pre-injury, right? So getting back to my work and walking, I thought, this was really important to me. Walking was really, really important. There's a lot of also secondary complications that you have to consider. So, bladder, bowel, spasticity, pain, lots of challenges, especially in the beginning that you're trying to deal with, sometimes throughout the years. Then, as you get older, and aging with a spinal cord injury, there could be other, things to consider also: osteoporosis, pressure injuries. I have blood pressure regulation issues, temperature control. So my blood pressure is really, really low. And so I feel, very dizzy, like I'm going to pass out all the time. Those are kind of a few, but it's basically all the things that you don't think about doing, Dawn, are all those challenges that we have. And, navigating in, we live in Vancouver here, and it's it's a great place to live. Don't get me wrong. I've traveled across the world to many different accessible places, but there's still a lot of things to do. There's still a lot of barriers that we face as far as, just education and awareness and those attitudinal barriers, as well as the physical accessibility of some buildings still, and getting around, and parking is a big issue for our members. And Chris?
I think some of the other more systemic challenges relate to the social isolation that so many of people with a number of disabilities actually face because of the challenges of accessing and participating in their communities, the barriers that exist that prevent that. Things like lack of accessible housing, particularly lack of accessible and affordable housing, lack of accessible transportation, lack of sufficient home support and funding supports that just prevent people from participating as full members of our community. And Vancouver is, as Teri said, is rather exceptional. Still lots of work to be done there, but in many regions of our province, there just are very few options for people to participate because of the barriers that exist.
So what's the toughest part about your work?
Well, I mean, I guess we all probably look at it maybe a little bit different. I think like my hardest part, so I would say two. Sometimes I am working at our rehab center here, pre-COVID days, and it's really hard to remember what it was like back when you first got injured or sustained your injury, and all those feelings and emotions, and seeing another side. So, part of my job is being able to help newly injured people see that sort of other side, that you can have a very fulfilling life with a spinal cord injury. But it's really hard when you're really new and in that place. Some of the other sort of challenges that I like, that I see are, as Chris sort of mentioned, people living in remote areas, right? I find that really challenging, and people who are really struggling within the system, like, that they don't have a lot of supports around them. Financially, it's hard. It's sometimes difficult to find a job. It's, people, I talked to one individual once that was in bed for 2 years because of a pressure sore. Like, I couldn't even imagine that. It's just, some people have these secondary complications that, keep them from participating in life. And, that's why we're here, is to be able to sort of talk with them and support them and provide them opportunities regardless of where they may be.
We're speaking with Chris Mcbride and Teri Thorson, and we're talking about Spinal Cord Injury BC. I'm just thinking about your first days following your accident and the conversations you had with those people that were there to help you. What was that like? Well,
I was not accepting anything. It took me 5 years. I think probably I didn't want to see myself as a person with a disability. I really just wanted to ignore everything, even though obviously it's impossible to do that. So I didn't even own mirrors in my home because I didn't want to see myself as a person with a disability or in a wheelchair or, different to how I was. I have a fashion background. I was a model for a period of time and a dancer. And I felt like those things were completely not available to me anymore. And, I gained a lot. I had felt a lot of power being tall because I'm 5'11", and I felt a lot of power from that. And now, I'm 42 inches tall, essentially, right? So that was really hard, but it took me kind of leaving my job and becoming immersed in the nonprofit world and seeing other people and realizing sort of that impact of being able to give back and the opportunities that were available to me, like within sport and recreation, and just, meeting other people and having that sense of, wow, they really actually get it. And beyond disability, I mean, they're just people that I want to be around in general because they're, great people. not just because they have a disability.
So what's a day like at Spinal Cord Injury BC?